California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We're coming to you from Sacramento, the state capital. We are joined by Ted Lieu, member of the California State Senate and an active Twitterer. Is that a word, Twitterer?
I think so.
And I follow you on Twitter, and you are frequently posting tweets about the NSA and your frustration with the NSA's tactics as it relates to tracking the telephone behavior of Americans and foreign nationals. President Obama recently came out with some proposed reforms. Let's focus on the telephone database question. He has said that he does not want the government to hold the database records any longer. It should be held by another entity. What do you make of that?
Well, my view is that for years, the National Security Agency has been violating the rights of Americans as well as over 38 million Californians by seizing and searching telephone data. Recent disclosures show that they also now look at text messages as well as internet traffic and other electronic data. So it's pretty widespread.
Right.
But on the telephone specific program, I'm not as much concerned with who actually holds it. I'm initially concerned with just the sheer volume of the collection, of why government needs to do this and to do it without a warrant.
What the government is saying, what the NSA says, is that they want to be able to track patterns. And they can't track patterns unless there is a significant amount of data with which to try to build the pattern.
Well, it's fine if they track patterns if they go ahead and get a warrant. And that's a cost imposed by the Constitution. If they don't like that, they should try to amend the Constitution. But they can't just start searching and seizing telephone data of all Americans without any reasonable suspicion. That to me is just flat out unconstitutional.
So what the president has said is regardless of who holds the data, that the government will need approval to mine.
That is a good reform. I support the president's reform in doing that, and I am encouraged by that reform. I think what the president announced is a good first step. I don't think it goes far enough. And then just like, on the foreign leaders aspect,
yes.
I actually don't care as much, or at all, because the Constitution doesn't apply to foreigners.
So
my concern are Americans in California.
So let's talk about tracking the behavior of foreigners. What President Obama said is he does not intend to really change the current policy. He wants broad authority to spy on foreign nationals, but as you said, he has indicated that they will no longer spy on foreign leaders. We know from information, I guess, provided by Mr. Snowden that we tracked on the Chancellor of Germany, the President of Brazil, and who knows who else.
Right. So I think it's sort of stupid to tap the phone of a German chancellor, but I don't have any constitutional problem with that. And so my concern, again, are really the Americans and Californians whose constitutional rights are being violated.
Should we say we're not going to?
That would be a national security decision that is way above my pay grade. But constitutional matters are not.
At the same time, there is the question of American companies doing business abroad in the telecommunications industry, and they have expressed concern that since the president has said that he will not change the policy with regard to tracking foreign nationals, it's going to be hard for them to do business overseas because the nationals of those countries won't want to be part of an American outfit.
And that's something that the president's going to have to consider on a policy basis. My whole concern with the NSA is from a constitutional viewpoint, where they're just violating the Fourth Amendment, which is very clear. It basically says government cannot engage in unreasonable searches and seizures. And to say that all Americans are suspicious, that's flat out unreasonable.
When we come back, let's talk about privacy and how this is implicated. For our viewers on HLN, we thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. So, Senator, we also know that President Obama addressed the question of privacy. And this area, I'm a lawyer, you're a lawyer. It was a little hard to figure out what the proposal was.
Right.
But he did tip his hat to the privacy concerns. And as I understand it, there will be some form of public advocate in the FISA court to advocate for privacy interests. Is that how you read this?
Yes.
Okay.
So on a general level, I believe privacy will be a defining civil liberty issue in the 21st century. With all the advancements in technology and the immense data that not just government, but private sector companies now have on all of us.
Well, what's amazing,
this is an important issue.
What's amazing to me is I'll be on a website and an ad will pop up, and it is extremely clear to me that that ad is targeting me, that they somehow know something about me, and that's why I'm seeing this ad. That's a private act,
right?
But it is, you know, a little creepy.
It is creepy, especially when you did not consent to it.
Right.
It'd be a little better if you actually had to check a box saying, hey, now I want this private sector company to know everything about me.
Right.
But they don't have those boxes and consent forms on these internet websites
and
usually.
At this stage, there's nothing that can be done. I mean, they are private actors. Is that right, sir?
Well, so different states are exploring
Okay.
different kinds of legislation to try to rein in the privacy breaches and so on, especially when a company like Target has this huge breach of over 100 million customers. What do you do about that?
It's interesting. We were in our Long Beach bureau. I think you were there with us. And over lunch, me and a colleague went to Target, and it wound up on that day, her information was breached. We both bought something. Mine wasn't for whatever reason, but she received notice that on this day. So it happens to all of us.
And then it leads to potential identity theft.
Which I have faced.
And then your credit rating gets all messed up, and it's hard to repair. So these are important issues, and we have to have a conversation about them. So what the president specifically proposed, there is a secret FISA court where
FISA is
foreign intelligence surveillance.
Thank you, sir.
So the NSA goes before this secret court and makes an argument saying, we have this secret program, and you, secret court, please let us go ahead and do this program. There's no opposition. And I liken it to a baseball game where the judge is the umpire and the NSA is the pitcher, and there's no batter.
It's like a grand jury
and
in a lot of ways.
That's why the NSA keeps winning every one of these decisions. So what President Obama has proposed, and I support, is you need an opposition. Our entire judicial branch is based on an adversarial process. And so he has created an office that's going to actually provide the arguments against what the NSA wants to do in terms of privacy matters.
But what's interesting is it seems as if the privacy advocate is really going to be focusing on policy pronouncements as opposed to specific requests that may deal with national security.
I would expand it. I think it's a good first step, what he's proposed. I think it should be more expansive than the way he has proposed it. I think in every case before the secret FISA court, there should be both sides, and the judges should have both sides being heard.
As a general proposition, have you been surprised by the amount of angst and anger expressed over this? And the reason I ask is, I think about what happened after 9/11, and it didn't matter. I mean, every American said, President Bush, you do whatever you want. And I still feel as if we're living in a post-9/11 world, and so I will admit I am a little surprised by the amount of noise that has been made about this. Because again, the intent is, there's been no suggestion that this information has been used for illicit purposes. It's really...
Well, there has, though, because there's been stories saying some NSA employees have been fired for using it inappropriately.
Fair enough. But I think, what's your sense of what I'm saying?
Well, I think it's correct that we have to be very aware of the dangerous world we live in. But I also want to recognize that our founders knew we lived in a dangerous world, and that's why they enacted the Bill of Rights, because they knew that an overreaching government is one of the greatest dangers that citizens face. And keep in mind, it is going to be harder for the NSA to do certain programs, but that's a cost imposed by our Constitution. If we're in a totalitarian state, we'd be much safer. We'd also be in a totalitarian state.
I understand what you're saying, and I want to thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for tweeting so efficiently and effectively. His Twitter handle is @TedLieu. Very easy. My name is Brad Pomerance. My Twitter handle @Brad Pomerance. His name is Ted Lieu, California State Senator. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition.
In what year did the NSA begin its program to collect bulk phone call records? 1998, 2001, 2002, or 2006? The NSA program to collect bulk phone call records began in late 2001 based on wartime authority claimed by President Bush.
It's California Edition coming to you from Sacramento. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Adrin Nazarian. He is a member of the California State Assembly. And so I want to speak with you about some of the horrors of the 20th century. Many of us know about the horrors of the Jewish Holocaust during the 1940s. What we may not know is that Hitler had an inspiration for the Jewish Holocaust, and that was the Armenian Holocaust. He went on record saying, "Who remembers the Armenians?" For those of us that don't know about the Armenian Holocaust, tell us a bit about it.
Thank you for bringing up this important issue. I thought it was very key for us to learn from our past so that we can know what we're dealing with in the future as well, because we've seen things happen even in amidst our lives right now, given the technology we have, and yet we haven't been able to stand before it and be able to take a clear stand and stop it. The Armenian genocide has been overwhelmingly well documented, especially by Americans in the United States.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because we know there are some Holocaust deniers, Jewish Holocaust deniers, but uniformly scholars reject any suggestion that the Holocaust did not occur during the 1940s. But there is a school of thought that continues to deny the Armenian Holocaust, and that school does get some credence. Turkey, which is where the Holocaust occurred, the Armenian Holocaust, query whether they're even willing to suggest that it was a reality.
Well, I think it's a matter of time, and I'm happy to discuss that later. But unfortunately, it's politics.
Right.
With acknowledgement comes reparations, comes paying back for property and damage. How do you estimate paying for 1.5 million lives? How do you estimate paying for the generations lost thereafter? How do you pay for all the properties that were seized and taken and now are under a different country?
And this occurred during World War I, is that accurate?
Yes.
And
World War I gets the blame as it was part of a greater war.
Right.
While it was a very systematic, intentional drive to force Armenians out of their homeland and annihilate a whole race.
At this stage, we know that in public schools in California, there is a directive that the Jewish Holocaust be taught. Your hope is that, taking nothing away from the Jewish Holocaust,
Absolutely.
that the other genocides of the 20th and 21st century are also part of the curriculum. Why don't you talk about the Armenian genocide, but that's not the only one you'd like to have it included in educational materials.
Thank you. No, it's very important. Again, going back to the point where looking forward, we need to know what we've dealt with in the past and be educated based on what's happened. It's key for us to learn about the Armenian genocide, about what happened in Darfur, in Rwanda, in Cambodia. The last 3 of these incidents, tragic incidents, have been happening at a time where we have capability to transmit information.
I mean, in South Sudan right now, I mean, we're looking
Yes.
at the news. There
Yes.
is palpable evidence that there is a genocide going on still in the Darfur area.
Yes.
And yet we have iPhones, we have ways to document and send these images around the world, but we believe it's still happening.
It is, and that's why it was important for us to start at not a very young age, but a younger age, in middle school or high school, and start as a part of oral history. Let students know what happened, how it happened, how we as human beings allowed for things like this to be able to develop and take place and shape.
Right. When we come back, I want to continue this conversation because it is so very important. We're speaking with Adrin Nazarian. He is a member of the California State Assembly. For our viewers on HLN, thanks so much for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. So, sir, you bring up the question of when do you educate about these horrors? It is a very dicey area. I mentioned to you that my daughter was given a book about the Holocaust in 4th grade. It made me a bit nervous because she had no context about the Holocaust. We are Jewish, and so the book was about a 9-year-old Jewish girl, and so we were a little concerned how she would internalize it. You're looking to have that education be more towards the middle school age, which I understand is probably appropriate, you know, psychologically, developmentally.
Sure. Well, first of all, the reality is that anytime someone can turn on the TV and see what's going on anywhere in the world, right now in Ukraine, what's going on, or has been going on for the last 2 months,
Yes.
And inquiring minds, inquiring students and children, the youth will ask questions and will want to find out more. Well, it's important for us to create a context in which there could be a curriculum of understanding exactly what information to discuss, to bring up, and to talk about how things occurred, so that students aren't just talking about mass killings, but they understand how unfortunately sometimes individuals can come into power for things like this to happen.
What's interesting about the Jewish Holocaust is there are survivors still living.
Yes.
They're in their 80s, but they are living, and they are going to schools, and they are talking. There are no survivors left of the Armenian genocide. Just chronologically, it's impossible.
Very few.
Are there? Oh, maybe
very few.
There are those over 100?
Very frail few.
Okay,
yes.
well, amen to that. But be that as it may, are there, for example, with the Jewish Holocaust, there's the Shoah Foundation, which
yes.
for 20 years has been recording these oral testimonies. Was that done? Is that being done for the Armenian genocide?
It's a great question. In fact, very recently, before Dr. Michael Hagopian, a dear friend of mine, passed away, he was a survivor.
He was, right.
2 months of age when
so no memories,
genocide,
but a survivor.
Yes,
right.
lost family members. He had dedicated his life to putting together the Armenian Film Foundation.
Fantastic.
Which documented and archived some, I believe, almost 500 different interviews.
Fantastic.
And before leaving us, he ensured that they are preserved well and made it part of the Shoah Foundation.
Oh, the
And
Jewish
so,
Shoah. Oh,
yes,
wow. Oh, how
what,
wonderful.
What better home for
Right.
these two to coexist together and be an educational program?
So will these be available, presuming AB 659 passes, for use in schools? Because, I don't know, it seems to me that may be one of the best ways to educate, is to have survivors discuss.
Absolutely. That was the key point. And as you pointed out, unfortunately, many of the survivors are not
Right.
with us anymore from the Armenian genocide.
If I may ask, and I don't mean to get too personal, in your family, I know you're of Armenian descent. Did you know survivors growing up?
No, none of, well, part of my family was from Russia.
Right.
The other part was actually driven out from the region of Nagorno-Karabakh and later established in a different part of the world because of being driven out. And that they were driven out actually in the 1920s.
Later.
Oh yeah.
Later,
So certain efforts were still being carried out even after World War I came to a conclusion.
Wow.
Because there was still some unfinished business.
Now, let me ask you, it's surprising to some that there could be controversy surrounding this bill because, as we know, Turkey is an ally of the United States, as is Armenia, but Turkey continues to be nervous about acknowledging the Armenian Holocaust. And so, are you able to get this bill through the legislature?
This is going back to the previous question that I wanted to answer. So Turkey is, it's very difficult to figure out what price to put on the cost of human life, of property. And so they've been denying this.
Right.
And they've been saying that this was something that was done by the Ottoman Empire in its waning days, and so it's done. The reality is that we really, anytime you want to move forward, you need to look at where you are, who you are, and be able to look at yourself in the mirror. That's why I say I think it's a matter of time until these certain...
But is it a matter of time before this bill passes, or do you think you can generate the support?
Coming to this bill, I was very proud to see that my colleagues in the Education Committee of the Assembly passed this bill unanimously in a bipartisan manner.
Reaps.
Absolutely. In fact...
Going to the Senate?
In fact, well, it's still going to go to appropriations, the floor, and then on to the Senate.
Okay, well, we wish you the best of luck for sure.
Thank you.
His name is Adrin Nazarian. He is a member of the California State Assembly. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition.
In what year did the first Armenian move to California? 1874, 1889, 1904, or 1911? The first Armenian arrived in California in 1874 and settled in Fresno.
This is California Edition coming to you from Sacramento, the state's capital. My name is Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by Cristina Garcia. She is a member of the California State Assembly, and I'd like to speak with you about higher education. We know that the governor has put a supreme priority on K-12 education Through Prop 30, you saw that was one of his priorities. Through his recent budget proposal, K-12 is really getting the lion's share of the surplus and the largesse. But higher education, while it's not being cut, it is not seeing the same advances that K-12 is receiving. What do you sense from this?
I think it's a combination of the governor definitely being invested in our youth and making sure that they're college ready and that they have that option if they so choose to. I think it's also a combination of Prop 98, and guaranteeing a floor and a ceiling there. And so obviously when we have more money, our schools are going to be getting more money. I think he got it right with the local control formula. I think this morning he said, it's more money for people who have less, and so that's very exciting to see that. He spoke about local control and having school administrators and teachers be in charge of that. They know better and they could do the next step. So I was excited to see that as an educator. I thought he missed the mark when he didn't mention the parents in there and their role in this process. But I think we also have made a promise to these kids. So you're going to do great in K-12. You're going to do your A through G requirements. You're going to be ready for college. And that means you should be able to get yourself into your local Cal State at a minimum, right? That's the promise we made to our kids. If you've been in a community college and you're ready to transfer, that means that they should have a slot for them. But because of the lack of money over the last past years and the cuts, we have broken that promise. We have kids who have completed that and there's no spot for them. We have kids that are ready to transfer and can't transfer, stuck at the community college a little bit longer. Wasting time, really, when they could be moving forward with their career. And so, he did give about a 2% increase to Cal States in this year's first round of the budget. I don't think it's enough. I don't think that 2% gets us so we could, at a minimum, meet the promise we have made. We could talk about how do we change it, how do we make our kids more, better prepared. But as long as we have a promise, we need to fulfill it.
So what can be done? Obviously, the budget is a negotiated document. And so, we're early in the process. Do you feel as if your colleagues in the Assembly and the Senate will fight a little harder for higher education?
I think all of the members have the areas that they choose to fight for. So for me, this is the area I identified this year that I choose to fight for. And it's my job to get myself and get my constituents, get the advocacy groups to help get my other members there with me, to get the Senate there with me and the governor there with me. And so I think it's, a matter of, if this is important to you, call my office, and say you want to help me and we figure out how we can work together.
What's interesting is the Assembly leadership and the Senate leadership on the Democratic side has made it a priority to create universal pre-K. And that's a $1 billion program. The governor, at least in the early rounds, didn't seem particularly interested in creating that program. And so you're looking to prefer higher ed. The leadership's looking at pre-K. The governor's looking at K-12.
So actually, I think you put words in my mouth. I'm not looking to prefer. I'm looking to spread it. And I think we shouldn't pick just one. I do think the pre-K is important. I know the governor hasn't always been very supportive of it. Pre-K is not babysitting. Pre-K, research shows, helps our kids, close the gap. And so it's important, just like our K-12 is important, and so is our higher ed. I mean, what's the point of getting kids through high school if they can't go to college and get those skills for those careers and those jobs that we have out there in science, technology, engineering, math?
Do you feel as if the community colleges are funded at an adequate level? Because like you said, to transfer.
I think this year they did well. In the budget, again, I'm sure anyone at the community college would say they need more. And, I might be okay with that, but I still think we need to be fair and spread the wealth and be, prudent with our money. Some should go to savings, but we could.
When we come back, I want to speak with you about some ethics reforms you're proposing. For our viewers on HLN, we thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back on California Edition. Assemblywoman, you have made a name for yourself. You grew up trying to kick out the scoundrels in Bell, metaphorically speaking, of course. We know about the Bell scandal, well covered by the Los Angeles Times. And so since you have entered the Assembly, you've been studying, analyzing, looking at whether we need to tighten up some of our ethics rules. Talk to us about what you've learned and what you hope to accomplish.
So I've always thought we need to change the rules. We need to make them better. We need to adjust them to face the reality that we live in today. I think ethics is constantly a moving target that reflects how society and our expectations also change. And so this last year I was studying, what are the expectations? What is legal? And also what's the political will? Where can I possibly have success in my house? So where are those politics? And so we came up with a package that we're going to be introducing. Multiple pieces are involved in there.
I see.
For example, I want to make sure that if you have some egregious fines for you've been using campaign funds to buy dog food, to
my.
travel.
Right.
You should pay for those fines out of your personal bank account and not your campaign account.
It's interesting you say that. You hear about politicians starting legal defense funds. And I always thought, you're contributing to help a candidate get out from under bad behavior or an elected official.
And so maybe the candidate, that this person is innocent, and so the legal defense fund is okay.
Well stated.
So let's say maybe, but if they are found guilty, maybe they have to then take personal funds to pay back those monies that they raised to their donors.
Right.
It's a possibility. It's not part of my package this week.
I understand.
But it's something definitely I think an opportunity. So I think it's looking at it that way. I also want to see that we have more transparency. I want to see total compensation for local elected officials online. We have salaries. What does someone earn? But we have a lot of stipends that individuals get, and that's not necessarily on the controller's website. And so I want to see clearly broken down and what it's for. I think per diems are not a bad thing. I think it's fair. But I just want to make sure it's not egregious. If someone's getting a $900 a month car allowance, I don't care what district you live in. It sounds pretty egregious and what city you're in. And so, things like that. I just want to be able to see it because a lot of what happened in Bell, and that's the Bell and a lot of my cities, they hide it through these other expenses, through these other boards. We've seen it. So that's not council salary, so it's not included in there.
Speaking of boards, we know there are just a whole host of elected offices one can seek. It's not just assembly and city council, water boards, sanitation districts. I understand that as we speak today, the campaign donation laws are a bit different for some of these special districts.
Yes, so a lot of districts have the jurisdiction, or the voters have the jurisdiction to put limits. A lot of these districts don't have limits.
At all?
At all. And so what we're looking for this year is how do we help districts get contribution limits of some sort. So we already have, for example, I as a state assemblywoman have contribution limits as to what I could bring in. And so also looking to expand that so that other agencies, starting with water boards, have limits of some sort. That's fair.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned water boards because we know water boards have been in the news, especially in Southern California, where there may have been some shenanigans going on.
And I want to say it's not just Southern California, it's my district, it's my backyard. And so again, it's addressing a local issue again. And so it might affect multiple water boards, but I think it's an elected office, and a lot of our constituents, at least in my district, don't seem to understand that these are elected positions, it's not an appointed position. And so we need to be in there involved. What are they doing? Asking questions. But we also need to...
But how do you create a scenario whereby we still encourage folks to consider public office? Yes. Because if running for office gets so onerous that you have to, if you miss one dot on an I or you don't cross that T, you can wind up being fined. It can be discouraging.
Well, I definitely, in that sense, those are not egregious fines, and I'm okay, for example, using your campaign money. And we need to have some flexibility, and I think that FPPC over the last 2 years has been, if you see their track record and you follow the news, they've been going after really big egregious stuff. And some of the smaller stuff is like, let's work with the individual. We all do mistakes. And I think that's fair, and that's part of the learning process. And so, we have to allow for the human factor, and we're going to screw it up sometimes.
And so what do your colleagues feel? It could be that some think, yes, let's tighten this up. Others, like, Cristina, why are you, rocking the boat? Let's just leave it as is.
And you're right. I think I'm going to get both perspectives, but I can't just worry about what my colleagues think. I have to worry about the fact that if I'm going to be here for 12 years, possibly in this House, if the voters let me be, I don't want to be considered the scum of the barrel. I got elected, and that's the first thing my dad told me. I'm proud of you, followed by now you're at the bottom of the barrel. And I went from being a math teacher and respected to that, and I didn't work this hard. I work really hard every day to be considered that way. I want the public to trust me. I believe in government. I believe in governance. I believe in the trust that's built here. And so I think I'm moving forward with that in mind.
Her name is Cristina Garcia. She is a member of the California State Assembly. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's California Edition.